Are you?
Like that being raised.
Good evening. It is now 6:29, and I call the regular meeting of the Victoria City Council to order. It is our tradition to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. If able, we invite you to join us.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the first item on our agenda is announcements. Our Victoria Fire Station will host a recruitment open house on September 11th at 6 p.m. Mark your calendars. If you are considering answering the call and would like to serve your community, please attend the recruitment open house or reach out to our fire chief, Dave Shoger, to learn more. Another announcement, the League of Women Voters of Eastern Carver County will be sponsoring a candidate forum for Victoria municipal offices at our City Hall right here in Council Chambers this week, Wednesday, September 11th at 7 p.m. The forum will be broadcasted live on our city's YouTube channel, as well as Mediacom Cable Channel 8. The recorded video will be later available through the League of Women Voters website. And another announcement, final announcement of the evening, the city is hosting a blood drive in partnership with American Red Cross on Tuesday, September 19th from noon until 6 at the Victoria Rec Center. Call 1-800-RED-CROSS or visit redcrossblood.org and enter Victoria Community to schedule an appointment. All right, that's it for announcements. Our next order of business is to adopt the final agenda. Council, is there a motion to adopt the final agenda?
Motion.
Second. Motion and second have been proposed. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item, which is open forum. Open forum is the opportunity for anyone to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda and not at an application form that will be coming to the council at a future date. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda and not in application form that will be coming to the council at a future date? Seeing none? Okay, let's move on to our next item, which is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are routine, administrative, do not require deliberation, or housekeeping items required by law. Consent agenda items are approved with one vote unless someone requests an item to be considered separately. Ms. Hardy, does staff wish to pull any consent items for a separate discussion and vote?
None from staff.
Council, any items that you'd like to see pulled for separate discussion and vote?
5.4.
Okay, let's noted that Councilmember Gunderson intends to pull item 5.4. Is there anyone from the audience who'd like an item pulled for a separate discussion and vote? Okay. Council, may I have a motion for the balance of the consent agenda, please?
I'll make a motion for the balance of the consent agenda this evening.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, now on to item 5.4, which was removed from the consent agenda for a separate discussion and vote.
So I pulled this item because if it is approved as the privilege to be done, and I want to tie it back to something else. Holy Family's been in the community, is in the community, and we've done some things for Holy Family to kind of help, and the neighborhood to kind of correct I don't think that I didn't think it was warranted. The city and research showed that it maybe was warranted. It hasn't really corrected any behaviors coming from Cochia. Today I almost got T-boned going through that same intersection. Okay, the driver was a Holy Family driver. I've called the principal, I've talked about how Holy Family drivers need to be better and need to do better. I'd like to see a consequence happen that if we can't get that driving situation under control, that this goes away. That if Holy Family can't get better drivers or make their students, their families, anybody going there with a white Holy Family sticker on the back of their bumper, to understand that we have done traffic mitigation efforts to make that intersection safer, yet people are still driving through the stop signs that we put in. Then what do we put stop signs in for? And you can tell when it's a Holy Family driver because they got the big white and green HF on the back of their car. So I would not like to see this passed if we can't put any consequences behind driving improvements. That's where I'm at on this. If they can't do it in this neighborhood, if they can't get their drivers, if they can't make them understand that being a good resident and being a good student and being a good driving student is part of that, then maybe they shouldn't get to fundraise for their school.
Any other comments on 5.4?
I'll make a comment in respect to Councilmember Gunder's concerns. I share your beliefs that we need more accountability from the few students that do disrespect the traffic laws that we've established in this town. I also share that we also have done a fair amount of accommodations to make Holy Family a good neighbor. I don't feel that withholding this gambling permit is the appropriate solution to the problem.
Didn't say withhold, I said tie consequences to.
Well, I think that the reality that as I see it is that we'll make a benefit that could accrue to a large number of people and the community held hostage, so to speak, to trying to say change behavior. I think that an appropriate course of action would be to have, and we can invite the members of the Holy Family community to a workshop to show that we're serious in this town about having the students that violate those laws held accountable. Now, on the other side, I also see other residents of our town who are not Holy Family committing the same egregious acts. The four-way stop sign, in my view, in the view of my neighbors, is a massive improvement. And I can recall that when those subdivisions were put before both Planning Commission and City Council, that this was one of the things that we wanted, and the traffic engineers told us no. And then ultimately, through our strength and resolve, we said the better decision here is not what the metrics show, but what the people show. It is an intersection that does cause for concern, and there are we've talked about other solutions as well. Some of them might be a little bit unpalatable, such as a flashing red line around that sign, which would cause other concerns. But I feel that the benefits of having funds from this activity flowing to the community outstrips our need to try to hold students accountable for their actions. So
I would argue that these are almost daily occurrences.
I understand, and
Like,
perhaps
these are
can
daily
ask
occurrences.
staff to have our county sheriff increase enforcement and be very diligent and have a conversation with the sheriff that warnings are simply intolerable. We looked at on the consent agenda, we see that the sheriff's report writes a number of warnings. We need to maybe ask for more actual infractions be prosecuted for the message that gets around. If it's nothing for a student to get read the riot act by one of the sheriff's deputies. They'll go back and they'll tell their friends, yeah, he pulled me over, I got a warning, no big deal. You start racking up $200 fines and parents start having to shell out that, they might have a little bit different activity on it. That is where I think we need to be insistent and have a clear communication with the Holy Family's team that we're serious about this. And this is not a new problem. We've had speeding on Cochilla from the time I've lived here 23 years ago, and I used to live at the house on that very corner. I understand that this is an issue and we should be spending our time having open dialogue. I don't feel that this, being held captive to it, is the appropriate avenue for resolving. But I am 100% aligned with you on your concern. That intersection is, to me, a very high-risk intersection because of the confluence of the streets that are there, the traffic that's coming through there, the change in traffic pattern, and frankly, more people are walking through there. So that maybe we need some other things there to have signs that say stop for people in the crosswalk. Just keep drawing attention to it. But we should pursue those avenues and be diligent about it. This particular approach to try to enforce accountability through this, I think we have some unintended consequences that I'm just at this point not willing to have people suffer those consequences for that.
Acting Mayor.
Yes.
Yeah, if I may, so Councilmember, I appreciate you mentioned this to me as we walked in tonight together, so I appreciate the heads up. As I said to you on the way in, I think sort of raising this concern, this is obviously a Holy Family related action item, and so raising a concern about traffic patterns around the school is fine for you to have done, as I said to you before the meeting. I guess I share Councilmember Ivansky's concern that literally tying the permit to traffic enforcement or traffic behaviors, I'm not sure what metric would be used, right? I mean, how many kids running a stop sign triggers a revocation of the permit? That concerns me. And it also concerns me that I think this intersection is not close to the particular establishment that we're talking about that the permit would apply to. I'm not sure that they're literally contiguous, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because you know your community better than I do. But so I have those concerns. I share those concerns with Councilmember Ivansky. I think it'd be appropriate. I don't know who's going to make the motion, if anybody's going to make a motion on this item, but tying them together to sort of grant the permit, but ask the Sheriff's Department to give you a report on enforcement activities around that intersection or something like that, asking staff to check in with the county on enforcement, that's all appropriate too. That's all okay. But I think I agree with Councilmember Ivansky that trying to literally tie those together would be sort of hard for staff to enforce. So my 2 cents on that.
Thank you, Attorney Vos. Yeah, and my comment here is I have trouble tying them together as well. I hear your concerns, but the tying them together. But I think having staff talk to the Sheriff's Department and really focus on that. So I don't know, Ms. Hardy, if you have any comment on that. How we could approach that with the Sheriff's Department and have further focus on that.
Certainly, Acting Mayor, members of the council. This afternoon, actually, we had some conversation between us, city staff, and the sheriff's office, and they did confirm that they will be increasing enforcement in that area, particularly around the time that school begins and as school is getting out. Also, Cochilla is the through Cochilla is a relatively new, it's a new connection for us. So with that, the sheriff's office has been working on trying to really step up enforcement in that area, and will continue to do that. So we've had some staffing issues within the community on different shifts. Related to the deputies. So we've had overall throughout the city, we've just had a little bit of a decrease in enforcement overall. But I did also get information and confirmation from the sheriff's office this morning that will be, by the end of the month, we'll be back at full strength with all of our shifts. And with that, we expect more increased enforcement, not only in this area, but throughout the community. It appears as if there's council consensus for the staff to connect and have those conversations with Holy Family and our sheriff's office. So we are happy to have those conversations. We've had those conversations in the past. They are ongoing. There are some plans in place for doing a mock crash later in the school year. And just to really talk about the importance of good driving behavior. in a way that feels very real with that, if you all are familiar with that. And we can certainly have the sheriff's office come in later in the year to talk to us about what that might look like, and what the goals of that is. The other thing is we're happy to ask for more detailed reporting around this intersection or in this area, or as well. Going forward, we can either include that in your monthly updates, or we can do a separate item, and I can talk to you all in the one-on-ones to see where consensus is on how that gets presented back to you.
Excellent, thank you. Any further comment on? Council may have a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the charitable gambling permit for Holy Family in application to operate activities at the Victoria Borough.
Can I get a second? Second, I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we're now going to move on to the regular agenda. Our first item this evening is item 6.1, Downtown West Phase 1 Development Update. Kicking us off this evening is City Manager Dana Hardy. Ms. Hardy.
Thank you, Acting Mayor, members of the council. This evening we have an update on our Downtown West project, and I'm just going to kind of set the stage, and then I will pass the baton over to Marco McLean and group. So as you all know, we have Downtown West is an extension of our downtown. It's a 13.5 acre parcel, and we have been talking about that land for over a decade. That's been in our possession. It is city owned. And the vision, we've done a lot of visioning around this, specifically in the last 5 years. And with that, we've talked about really developing that site over 3 phases over a period of time. And with that vision, which was really conducted with extensive community input, that we envision a mixed-use development with commercial, office, and residential space in there. A very active place that's connected and truly an extension of our downtown. So in September of 2022, we reached a purchase and sale agreement with Marco McLean, who will be giving an update here shortly. In October of 22, the final plat approvals and development agreement and the TIF agreement were also approved, and that would be for phase 1. So this evening, we've not broken ground yet or finalized those agreements. In other words, put those into action. And this evening, we're going to get a brief update on where we're at with that project. So if there aren't any questions for me, perhaps Tim and Mark maybe want to come up to the podium.
Any questions, guys?
None for me.
Great, thank you. Can you introduce yourself and where you're from, guys?
Yes, Tim Marco, Marco McLean Development. My address is 17158 Stonebriar Circle in Prior Lake. My business partner, Mark McLean here, as well as our development partners from Schaefer Richardson, Katie Anthony, and Brad Schaefer. Acting Mayor, members of the council, we've been in front of each other numerous times over the last couple of years. We're going to keep our portion of the update a little brief and then hand it over to our development partners to bring in some more detail. We were here back in April with an update, and 2024 proved to continue to be a little challenging. After our update, we had to replace our debt partner and our equity partner, found a new debt partner, found a new equity partner, and kind of go through that motion that unfortunately we're seeing in the development industry right now quite a bit. But we're here, and we'll certainly answer any questions that you all have after the update. We think we've got some positive news and continue to put a lot of work into this project, are absolutely committed to it, and look forward to an eventual groundbreaking here. So without any more of my rambling, I'd like to introduce Katie Anthony to provide more of a detailed update.
Thank you.
Good evening, Acting Mayor and members of the council. As Tim mentioned, my name is Katie Anthony. I'm Vice President of Development with Schaefer Richardson. Brad Schaefer, who's our CEO and founding principal, is here as well. We've been working with Marco McLean for over a year on this project. Brought us in to partner particularly on the capital piece of the project. Schaefer Richardson is a 30-year-old company. We've done a lot of work throughout the Twin Cities, including housing similar to what's proposed out here in downtown West. And we're really excited about working in the city. We think the site is great, and we really appreciate the relationships that we've built with the city staff over the last year or so. As Mark mentioned, the last update that they provided back in April, I wasn't able to attend that meeting. We talked about having a debt and equity partner on board and moving towards closing. Unfortunately, as has been the case for over the past couple of years, it's still a really volatile market, and the capital markets are continue to be fairly tight for investment and for lending. You hear in the news about interest rates, that's a portion of it, but a big part of what's happening in those markets, and we've seen it across the board on all of the project types that we develop. The good news is that despite that partner not being able to perform on behalf of this particular project, we've been able to locate another partner with similar terms on the debt side, and we've been moving forward to them. They're very excited about this project, very excited about the location, and more recently, we've been able to secure an equity partner as well. And so we're remobilized with a project team and moving forward towards closing this fall. With that being said, we've been working with the building department and the staff to make sure that we have all of our approvals lined up, all of our permits ready to go, and we're looking forward to getting this project kicked off later this year. And with that, I'll take any questions that you have.
Just topical, we've given a significant amount of extensions to this project. How comfortable do you feel that you'll be able to, you had a November 30th deadline to get closed by, or are we going to make that?
It is our full intent to make that, yes. As I mentioned, we intended to close in the spring and start construction then. We've been able to regroup, and we are on a path right now. We have a critical path that's built out that foresees us closing before that time.
If you would take a few seconds to talk about your risks and opportunities that you have in front of you about those being able to perform within that deadline.
Yep, there's a lot that goes into closing, a lot of paperwork and documents. We have a team that understands that and understands the deadlines that we're working with, and understands that we've had patient sellers, you all as well as the Boyer family, that have been along for the ride on this particular transaction. And so, if in terms of hurdles to closing or potential risks, they always exist. The lender has underwritten this project. They've been on board with us since about June, late May, June. The equity investor, we've had quite a bit of back and forth with them. So they're committed to this project. We've started spending resources on getting those documents in place that we need with them to close. We have all of the other players, so title company, design, contractor, everybody is still on board with seeing this through. So I think the risks are fairly low. Not to say that there's none. I mean, there's always risk with real estate. Opportunity-wise, I mean, we are pushing, and we do have a team of very experienced players, and so I think in terms of getting all the pieces in place and getting it in the ground really before, starting at least before the snow flies. You can never predict the weather here. Will be our opportunity, and from our perspective, the project should deliver in the first part of 2026, which is a great time to open a project. And so that's an opportunity for us as well. I will speak to the fact that, there has been a fair amount of supply that's been delivered to the Twin Cities marketplace over the last 2 years, really, and will continue to be this year. There are very little new starts happening in the Twin Cities. And so in terms of of this project coming online at an ideal time. You don't hear of a lot of market rate multifamily deals that are getting closed these days, and so there really will be a dearth in supply coming on the market at this time, which is an opportunity for Victoria as well as this project itself.
Okay, and then last, I suspect you guys are aware of the Highway 5 reconstruction, 11 improvements. We have to put a roundabout in for that. How does that construction timeline, do you think, affects your construction timeline and being able to get materials in and out and completing your project in the time frame that you think that you've had planned for this?
Yep. Council member, we are aware of the roundabout project. Of course, we wanted this project to happen and kick off earlier than that. We'll continue to work and coordinate with our contractor. We'll coordinate with the city and the county's contractor on delivery schedules and things like that. But I think the final construction and the delivery of the project should line up nicely with the roadwork project.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Construction costs, the longer you wait, I can't imagine that they've stayed as low as they were when the project was approved. Are you concerned with the rising costs of materials and things like that? And is that going to be an impediment that we get in 2025, that it's going to slow you down because you've got to wait for more funding? Or where are we at with?
Sure, good question. Councilmember Gunderson and members of the council. Inflation has been a big topic of conversation as of late. Really, in the world that we work in, it was particularly hard felt between kind of the start of COVID and about a year and a half ago, when interest rates started going up. It made it harder for projects like ours to pencil, and so actually, from a supply and demand standpoint, from construction labor, it's made it's kind of flatlined inflationary growth in the construction trades. We have a really good relationship with the contractor we're working with and keep in regular touch with them on potential cost increases. And I think generally what we've seen over the last 6 to 9 months is that while some items may have gone up, others have come down. And at this point, we're looking at a flat price. We will sign our contract when we start construction for a maximum price, and they will work within that.
Okay. So interest rates are, as they fall, hopefully that evens out whatever labor and material costs you see on a rise with long-term interest rates. Hopefully they're looking at being cut down.
And nobody lets us make a bet on positive news that might be happening in the future. Right. So what we have to underwrite is really a more conservative take. So from a pricing standpoint, we'll lock in our price with our contractor at closing. We make sure that we have contingency on hand for any unforeseen items that might come up, and then we typically underwrite a fair cushion on something like interest rates. So hopefully we'll see some benefit from that, but we don't generally count on that, and okay. Lenders and investors won't let us count on that either. Yep.
I guess overall, I'm hearing some excitement and some positive momentum, which is great. We all want this project to move in the right direction and move forward. So continue the open communication. I would highly recommend that. And any other comments from my colleagues here?
None for me.
Okay. And this item was discussion only, and so we will take no formal action at this point. So I'll open the floor for any further discussion now at this point from staff or at this point.
Acting Mayor, members of the council, just real quick, I want to say it's been a long road, but we really appreciate the partnership and the relationship that we've developed with the team that's sitting here. There's been a lot of collaboration and really working together to get the vision of the council and the community built through this project. So thank you for your patience as we work through this, and we're very excited for this update and looking forward to our groundbreaking.
You will all be invited.
Thank you. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you very much.
Next item is item number 6.2, which is a public hearing to consider a temporary noise permit for 1150 Lilac Circle. Associate Planner, Mr. Briley, will present this item. Mr. Briley, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Acting Mayor and council members. Tonight is a public hearing for temporary noise permit for 1150 Lilac Circle. The request is for this Saturday, September 14th, and the reason for the request is for an outdoor wedding and wedding reception that'll have a DJ playing music as well as announcements outside of the home. The request is from 4 p.m. in the afternoon till 11 p.m. at night. In addition, the neighbors have been informed, not only by the applicant talking to neighbors, but also we sent out a public hearing notice. The comments that we have received as staff have been positive and have been supportive of the permit. Normal quiet hours would begin at 10 p.m., so this would only be an extension of an hour past normally when you have to quiet down outside events. And then we would need to open the public hearing, and I stand for any questions.
This is a public hearing, and I'll now open the public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this item? I'll open it again. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this item, item 6.2? One more time. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to this item? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and I will open the floor for council discussion.
I don't have any discussion on this item, Acting Mayor.
Congratulations.
Seeing no more discussion, I will ask for a motion.
Motion. Motion to approve the issuance of a temporary noise permit for 1150 Lilac Circle between the hours of 4 p.m. and 11 p.m. on Saturday, September 14th, 2024.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next is item 6.3 is a public hearing to consider amendments to our ordinances related to the animals and stormwater management ordinances. Presenting this item is our city engineer, Cara Guerin. The floor is yours.
I don't know why I was looking around for somebody else to present it. I was thinking there was another item in front of me. Sorry about that. All right. Acting Mayor, members of the City Council, I am appreciative to the planning staff for assisting with this item because you don't normally see me in front of you relating to amendments to ordinances. But so as the council is aware, the city has an MS4 permit that we are obligated to comply with. That's issued by the state of Minnesota in association with the Clean Water Act, technically. So through our last round of permit update, there was a number of revisions to our program that were identified that needed to be made, and an area of revisions related to ordinances. So what this specific item tonight before you is some ordinance revisions to really kind of clean up some old language that has been in existence for quite some time, but then also to comply with the revised permit. So related to animals, the only real modification there is clarification of maintenance responsibilities for pet waste on property, both public and private. So we are required to have an ordinance that says people need to clean up their pet waste. And then more specifically, a lot of the revisions relate to stormwater management. So one of the things that we wanted to do, so the city has an engineering design and construction manual that is also approved by ordinance. And our goal is to make sure that all of the technical requirements are really housed in that document instead of in the ordinance. Because as new requirements are revised in the industry and by the MPCA, it's much easier for us to update that document than make wholesale ordinance revisions. So we wanted to clean up the section so it doesn't have all of that information contained in the code. We also are required to adopt the MPCA construction permit requirements. So we specifically are noting that applicants to the city need to comply with their requirements, as well as watershed district approvals. So if you're doing a project in the city of Victoria, regardless of what's in our code, you already have to get approval from either the watershed district or Carver County WMO, but the PCA wants to see that written into the ordinance, so it's clearly a requirement. So that's more formalized. Another element that we had to incorporate into the ordinance was just standards for bulk storage of de-icing materials, so salt. We don't have a lot of this within our community, but as the community grows and expands, if you had as an example, an industry in the South Growth area that had a large parking lot and was storing de-icing materials on their property, this ordinance would require that de-icing material be stored properly. And then lastly, we did add some enforcement and reimbursement procedures, and I'm actually going to pull up the agenda item so I can take a look at that language. So specifically, there are 4 provisions within the enforcement requirements, and really having this language in here is important as the city deals with violations of our stormwater permits. A particular example that's pretty common that we're wrestling with is erosion control issues. So if you drive into a new development area and there's sediment all over the place that isn't getting cleaned up or swept frequently, that's an area that our public works team spends a lot of time issuing notices and working with contractors to get cleaned up. This language specifically would allow us to issue a stop work order if they're not complying with our requirements. So both the first 2 items really are what we would more commonly see. Items 3 and 4 listed here are from, actually all 4 of these are from the MPCA's model ordinance that they recommend that cities adopt. And I will just note and would ask the city attorney to comment on any concerns he might have with the city's ability to actually implement items 3 or 4 as recommended in the MPCA's model ordinance. So I'll send it your way, city attorney.
Yeah, Acting Mayor, thank you, Kara. Yeah, just as to 3 and 4, 3 of course says if you find there's a public health safety risk out on a property related to stormwater management practices, you'd go out and do something about it. I will advise you, if that happens, we should get a warrant to do that. We shouldn't just go onto somebody's property even though they've pulled a permit. And so that goes to number 3. And then as to number 4, to the extent we would go that far, we would find a public health safety problem and actually go out and make improvements on somebody's private property, we would want to collect that money, obviously. And number 4 speaks to that. I would advise that we give notice to that landowner and give them a right to a hearing on that issue, despite the language number 4. I'm fine with 3 and 4. It comes out of the MPCA's recommended ordinance language. I'm just going to advise you if we ever get that far, and as Kara said, we're probably not going to ever get that far, but if we ever did, we're going to want to protect property owner rights, because I don't think you want to press your language here that far. So that was the caveat I wanted to make. I think the language is good. Obviously, having stronger language is fine. I'm just going to advise that you protect landowner rights.
Thank you, Attorney Voice.
And I think, gotta get back over to the right place. I don't think I have any other comments. This does require holding a public hearing. And the planning department has noticed the public hearing.
Yeah, this is a public hearing, and I will now open the public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this item? Again, anyone who wishes to speak on this item? One more time, anybody who wishes to speak on this item, item 6.3. Seeing no one, I will now close the public hearing and I'll open the floor for council discussion.
Acting Mayor, on the amendment for that's the section is dog waste disposal. These are probably like perhaps nitpicky, but rules of construction. our section is titled dog waste disposal, but our language in the ordinance references any domestic animal. So perhaps it would be advisable to strike the dog waste disposal and have it be domestic animal waste disposal as the section name. And then I just would like to take your council members' temperature on the proposed language speaks of periodic removal within a property owner in terms of their animal waste. So would we like to perhaps clarify our ordinance and define more clearly what periodic might mean? Periodic to having, when I was a 10-year-old, meant maybe monthly, but periodic to my father meant every week. So that said, would we want to consider, putting a more narrow definition of periodic to perhaps be at least monthly, bi-weekly? We certainly don't want to create the animal waste patrol, but certainly I think what we're trying to do is not create a nuisance. And at what point does periodic delve into nuisance? But so I'd like to maybe give consideration to that, maybe asking staff to make this modification. And if we make a motion, we would, if we choose to further define what periodic means.
I would assume this is proactive and not reactive. Are we doing this because we have a problem with people not cleaning up after their animals, or is this proactive, meaning that we're putting ourselves in line to be able to tell someone if they're not doing it, that we can tell them to pick up after their animals?
So Mayor, members of the council, we're doing this because the MPCA says we have to.
Okay.
So that's why I'm here with the issue. I'm not aware, and I'm looking around the table of us having known issues with pet waste other than some challenges within downtown that staff has worked with the folks who would be involved in that directly. But I'm not aware of it being a historic problem that's come before the city on private property, because it's the change is adding this private property language in.
Right. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to prescribe to somebody how often they got to pick up after the dog. I mean, if they want to leave it on their private property until it becomes a problem to their neighbors or smells bad, we can say we have an ordinance that says you need to pick up periodically. And if we're at the point where we're telling them they need to pick up, then that would define periodically that it needs to be taken care of. I mean, some areas we like to micromanage, and other areas we don't. We either micromanage or we don't micromanage. And so I would just say periodically, if it becomes a problem, if Hobbs, my 130-pound Newfie, creates more waste than somebody's 3-pound Chihuahua, it's probably going to happen. Now, what's more waste? What's creating more waste? Am I going to pick up after Hobbs? Yep. But is it becoming a problem for my neighbors? No. And so let's not micromanage this. We put periodically in there. If it becomes a problem, we say we're issuing a warning to pick up after your animals in your yard. This is your periodic notice. I think that's kind of where it is. I don't know. And we're being told to do this, not really having to do it. So if we're being told until something becomes a problem, then we can address it, I guess.
I mean, fair. Yeah. I'm just trying to, we have had some experiences lately with staff having to be pressed by residents about a lack of specificity and saying, it's not specific, I don't have to do that. And clearly there becomes a question of intention. That's sort of the direction I want to take. I think you bring up a good point that if it is a problem, then we've probably tripped the periodic trigger. And then as such, we should have staff note that when these kind of issues come up, it has been addressed by council. Council has given their view on what this means. and they can refer to the minutes, and they can refer to our recording of this to clearly define what the council's intention is around this. I'm fine with that, and they can say that periodic means. By the time we get to a problem, you've already had your curiosity has been reached. Has been made. Okay, thanks. So so just again cleaning up the housekeeping of the name of the section.
Yes, I was going to say domestic animal.
Yeah.
So is that something that's done?
Acting Mayor, members of the council, yes, I think as long as our city attorney gives the thumbs up, that's a pretty easy change that we can just do if you are willing to authorize us to do that.
Yeah, Acting Mayor, I agree with everything everybody said here so far. I think the cleanup of the dog waste title is totally sensible, and I appreciate that clarification. And then as to the other issue, I understand the language to say you've got to clean up your dog poo-poo as often as is necessary to avoid creating a nuisance. So if you've got a big dog, it's going to be more often than a little dog. So I think that's right.
Great.
Okay. Seeing no more discussion, I will now ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt these ordinances subject to changing the section title to refer to animal waste disposal as we've agreed this evening.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Our next item, number 6.4, is also a public hearing. This public hearing is to consider a shooting bow and arrow application for 6920 Rolling Acres Road. Presenting this evening is Assistant City Manager Alyssa Nelson. Ms. Nelson.
Hello there, Acting Mayor, council members. Give me 1 second to pull up the presentation. All right, here before you, we have a special permit application to discharge a bow and arrow that was submitted to staff for the property of 6920 Rolling Acres Road. The purpose of the special permit is to provide residents the opportunity to discharge firearm or bow and arrow within the corporate limits of the city of Victoria in residential, commercial, industrial areas with the authorization from City Council first. Hence the reason we're bringing this before you this evening. Like I said, the application is 6920 Rolling Acres Road, which is a residential zoned property. It is for bow and arrow use only for recreational hunting. Just to give you an understanding of where that property is located, we do have a map of it up on the screen. As you see, we have several neighbors surrounding the property. And as also part of this special permit application, we are required to hold a public hearing. Neighbors within 350 feet of the property were notified of tonight's public hearing. Another piece to that is written comment was provided to city staff prior to the agenda packet publication, and we have included that as part of the agenda packet for you tonight. So with that, I will pause here for any questions, as well as allowing you to hold the public hearing.
Let's start with the public hearing. This is now a public hearing, and I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on item 6.4? Hi, thank you. Can you state your name and location for us?
Jane Wiseman, 6940 Rolling Acres Road, right next door to Bill Ask. I'm adamantly opposed to this permit. I hope the council has read my letter. It contained all the facts and concerns. I just wanted to add one more thing. That was another thought that came to me. If I was interested to sell my home in the near future, and this permit was granted, I would have to disclose to potential buyers that there is a hunter next door to you here. And I would imagine that would eliminate most, if not all, buyers, because I don't want to live next to hunting. I wouldn't buy the place. So that was the comment I wanted to add, and then I want to hear what the council members have to say about this. I can't believe this is even being considered. So that's what I had to say.
Thank you, Ms. Weisman. Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this? Item 6.4? One more time, anybody else who'd like to speak on item 6.4? Then I will close the public hearing and open the floor for council discussion.
Mayor, acting mayor, if I may, just so I don't know anything more about this, frankly, than what's in your packet, except one thing, maybe more than is in your packet, as to discharge of firearms. So this is an application, as I understand it, that would apply to both bow hunting or bow shooting and firearms. As to firearms within an incorporated city, it's not legal, and there isn't a mechanism for a city to make it legal to discharge a firearm within 500 feet of a house for hunting purposes. So there is not an avenue for that to be legal. Candidly, I've not found, or I haven't looked in your code for the language of this special permit that's before you, so I can do that right now. But as to discharging a firearm, a gun, in a city, that's not something you're going to be able to allow. As to a bow, I guess that's a separate discussion, but I'm not sure that's really what the application is after. It sounds to me like it's an application to allow either or both of those, and there's not an avenue to allowing that.
Okay, so to be clear, Attorney Bose, there is not an avenue to allow the discharge of a firearm for hunting purposes within 500 feet of a structure.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
So with respect to that standing, sounds like it's a statutory defined requirement. Certainly people who find themselves into the self-defense purpose position, sure, this doesn't apply to that. This is for hunting within 500 feet of a structure.
Yep.
So on the prospect of having somebody ask us to discharge a firearm for the purpose of hunting, any lot that is probably smaller than 500 feet in depth would not be something that could even be considered, correct? So
yeah, acting mayor and council, that's what I'm saying. I mean, again, I looked at the packet today and was going through this, so I'm confessing to you what I know and don't know. But yes, that's my understanding is exactly what you just said.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Being someone who hunts, and I guess my brain when I read through this didn't even go to firearms because you can't discharge. I just know you can't discharge it within a city, and two, typical hunting practices aren't. If there's a structure, even in an open field or on hunting land that you're hunting in, firing at a building within 500 feet is heavily frowned upon and in most cases illegal. So my brain didn't go right to an actual firearm. It did go to bow hunting, and I would assume it might be turkey bow hunting in that back area, just based on the population of turkeys that are in that area and that I've observed, even being at Mount Olivet, that they walk the lake back there, and you can see gaggles of them coming right through. Firearms is absolutely no. Bow hunting still gives me heartburn over where you're gonna you get a little anxious on a big one, and the next thing you know, you shot your neighbors in the house up with you got a bow sticking out of their garage on either side, or in their yard, or God forbid, it's a car that's going by. Whether it's in the front or the backyard, we're not defining that either. And so I guess the question I would have for Bob is, if we allowed, is there trapping? Is trapping something we would allow on a property if they wanted to trap for the purposes of hunting and for food? I'm assuming that's what this would be And I'm making the assumption that would be a turkey-style permit that's going through the yard. To do.
Yeah, Acting Mayor, Council, the honest answer to the specific question is I don't know, but I think I would get around not knowing that by saying, as I understand the request here, it's not for that. So I don't think it's a request related to trapping. You might be right for the purpose, that it may be for, collecting food, animals for food, but I don't think that's a request before you. So that's my punt answer on that one.
Ms. Hardy.
Thank you, Acting Mayor, members of the council. Just for some additional background information and context, this ordinance that we're referring to has not been updated since 1999. So if you can imagine how much Victoria has changed since then, this is one of the ordinances that staff have flagged to be reviewed, and we've started to do some preliminary research on what other communities and how they are handling these types of permits, or whether they are handling these types of permits. So we've not done a lot of deep dives on this, but what I will share with you is what we've initially discovered is that there are a number of cities that do not allow any hunting in a residential area, which this would be considered residential. However, there are a handful of cities that still allow for that to occur in an agricultural area. So that is something that we will be coming back to you later to see if there's consensus for us to do some housekeeping changes on that ordinance. That's not what our ordinance says right now. The process that you're going through right now is reflective of what that ordinance spells out for when there is an application, but I just wanted to make a note that what we're seeing in other areas in the last time that this ordinance was updated.
Thank you. Sorry, any further comment?
I think that we were asked a question by Ms. Weissman, why would we even consider this? And I think we have to give her an answer, and the answer is that somebody's come to us and we're required to consider the item. And I think also in that consideration, we also bring the benefit of these discussions to give us some formulation on what we need to do for all of our residents in Victoria and how we're going to lead and guide for the future. So that by no means is reflective of my opinion to approve or deny this. I'm just simply stating for Ms. Weissman why we have to bring this before the public for discussion.
I would just offer if the hunting isn't for the purpose of food, and there's nuisance animals, there are services that can be utilized to help mitigate nuisance animals, live trapping, live removal, things like that. So I would, if there's, bring that to us so that we can talk about that as well. If there's a nuisance animal creating a problem in the back, that, or on the property, then that's something that we need to address. But if it passes or fails, just the due consideration is what we're here for just about every request. So.
Well, I think to that point, Councilmember Gunderson, it's lacking in our summary materials. The applicant had every availability, just like Ms. Weissman, to come before us and address before council as to what are the underlying purposes behind that. Yep. We don't have that information at our disposal. What we do have is, for consideration, is the next door neighbor has put together a very detailed memo, and I can, I believe that going through that effort, it would not be something that is lacking of fact. What seems to be information that we can rely on to make a decision. So with that, I think unless there's some further comments, maybe we consider a motion.
Yeah, seeing no more discussion, I will ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion to deny the shooting application for William S. at 6920 Rolling Acres Road.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Our next item is item 6.5, a final plat and final PUD for Victoria South Residential Development. Presenting this evening is our city planner, Brian McCann. Mr. McCann, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Acting Mayor and Council members. Tonight we have an application from Golden Valley Land Co. for a final plat and final planned unit development rezoning, or PUD, for their first phase. As you may recall, this project was reviewed during the sketch plat phase in January of this year, and their preliminary plat was reviewed and approved this past May, and they have come forward with the final plat request, which was reviewed by our Planning Commission at their regular meeting last week. Excuse me. As you're also aware, review of the final plat involves details for the development, including finalization of the development agreement and approving construction plans and things like that. So looking at the location and existing conditions, it's located just south of the Marsh Hollow development and the railroad through the south portion of town. The site conditions, it is a vacant farmstead with fields. There are some wetlands on the west side of the site, as well as some trees to the north, central, and south of the site. Also, West Chaska Creek runs through the northeast, and previously there were some farm structures here. They have since been demolished and removed. Looking at the final plat for this first phase, it's currently zoned agricultural after annexation. They are proposing the final PUD, as I mentioned, with an underlying R4 high-density residential. They're proposing 70 units with this first phase, as well as a clubhouse and outlots for wetlands and future phases. Now, the site is just over 24 acres in size, but for this phase, they're only disturbing about 7.4 net acres. So they're looking at a density of about 9.5 units per acre. As you're aware, this land is guided for 12 to 36 units per acre, but their preliminary plat approval did meet this guidance. So we ran this past the Metropolitan Council, and they did not have any concerns with a lower density for this first phase. As you're also aware, the planned unit development process is to allow innovative, creative, and flexible development. The initial input is provided at sketch plat, then the details approved during preliminary plat, and then the final ordinance, which has been brought forward to you this evening as part of the final plat approvals. So outlined in that ordinance are our deviations from our city code. These were included with the packet with you this evening, and they're in the ordinance presented. As you know, a typical corridor width for a public street is 120 feet. The lowest point that the applicant is proposing with this development is 65 feet. The apartment parking also requires 2 spaces per unit, with one of them being enclosed. They're proposing a few reduction in the number of enclosed stalls, bringing them down to 1.89 spaces per unit. They're also asking to reduce the front setbacks for townhomes and for the clubhouse parcel from 25 feet and 45 feet respectively down to 20 feet for both. They're also looking at patio side and rear setback reductions to 0 for both of those. They're also proposing to increase the townhome impervious from 75% to 95%. The maximum number of apartment units in our R4 high density is 100. They have proposed 144 at preliminary plat for this project, and then the landscape berms typically have a 3-to-1 slope, but they have 2-to-1 slopes maintained proposed. Moving on to the architecture, lighting, and signage, they did provide renderings at preliminary plat that showed the townhomes. I've included them again here on the screen on the right. Based on our requirements for townhome parkings and exterior materials, they do seem to meet the requirements. We'll have to evaluate the apartment building when they apply for a site plan and building materials application in the future. And then we will also evaluate the lighting specs at that time. and then they did not provide signed renderings for review, but we will require them when they move forward with a building permit for those. Moving on to the landscaping, they are meeting most of their requirements, so they have a minimum 25% required open space. They have about 52%. They're also required to have 1 tree and 1 shrub for every 1,000 feet of that required open space. They are meeting that requirement as well. They need boulevard trees every 35 to 45 feet. That standard only applies to city streets, so they are meeting the requirements since the internal streets will be private roads. And then they need a 40-foot buffer adjacent to County Road 11. As you can see, they've provided the buffers on the plan with that 2-to-1 unmaintained slope that I mentioned earlier. And then foundation plantings are required around the townhomes and apartment buildings. They have noted on the plans that they will provide those at a later date, but we have not seen renderings for those yet. Moving on to tree preservation, they're proposing 29% removal throughout the entire site, which requires 47 mitigated trees to replace that. They're placed to fill on the north border adjacent to the railroad to act as additional buffer space. They are not proposing a berm with that tree preservation area. For the parking and pedestrian connections, as I mentioned, they're meeting the townhome requirements of 2 spaces with 2 enclosed for half the units with an additional 1 enclosed for the other half. So it comes out to about 1.5 enclosed spaces per townhome unit. They're meeting that based on the renderings provided. And then the deviation proposed, as I mentioned earlier, for the apartment building. They are also showing trail connections along the collector road that comes through the site and moves down to the future commercial and flex employment areas. And then additionally along County Road 11 with future improvements for that road. For park dedication at 70 townhomes for 2 residents a unit per our code, they're required 1.86 acres of land dedication or $196,000 for this phase or some blend of land and cash. There is not a park proposed for this development, so we are expecting a cash fee with reductions for the trail areas that I mentioned in the last slide. With that, I will pass it over to Kara.
Thanks, Brian. All right, so specifically speaking about access and streets, this is the same information that was shown on the preliminary plat, so I'm not going to spend a significant amount of time discussing the private streets that the City Council approved with approval of the preliminary plat, but just to remind folks, the main roadway through here will be a collector road meeting collector standards, public street, and then the other streets will be private. So specifically though, related to County Road 11, so with the proposal here tonight with the final plat approval and the potential preliminary plat application coming forward for the Quick Trip property that you all had a presentation on at last council meeting. The developer of this property, the developer for that property, myself and Carver County are working together to figure out how we can facilitate the improvements that are needed to County Road 11 to accommodate these 2 projects. Right now, the slide here shows that the County Road 11 improvements aren't anticipated till 2027. That's now been updated to 2028. The reason behind that is the county's project includes intersection improvements at 10 and 11, and we don't want to have Highway 10, any part of Highway 10, between Waconia and 212 under construction while Highway 5 is closed in 2027. So we're continuing to work collectively among the parties to figure out what the right timing and approach to the improvements are for County Road 11. So we're going to continue those conversations as the project moves forward. But specifically, when a development agreement, I don't know why my brain couldn't produce the word development agreement, comes forward for this project, we would anticipate it including some requirements for improvements on 11. Site utilities. So proposed utilities are coming from Marsh Hollow development to the north. The engineer for this property, as well as the engineer for the property to the south, have been working in collaboration with the city's consultant to find the ideal optimal route for extending the trunk sanitary sewer through these parcels that will serve the area to the south. But the other area of concern that's been flagged for the city for quite some time relates to well number 6. So well number 6 is under construction in the Marsh Hollow site. The latest update for the timing for that well to be operational is now beginning of October. We are waiting for parts that we need in order to complete the startup of the well. The other element that we've been working through is that while we will have the well completed and operational, we do need to amend our permit with the DNR to be able to regularly use that well. So that work is ongoing. But since the preliminary plat review for this development, we've been working with our consultant who has the city's water system model. And we have updated the water system model to reflect some operational changes that the Public Works Department completed to the booster station. And then we've added the proposed units to this area for this particular plat. And at this point, staff is comfortable with moving forward with the final plat approval, allowing construction to begin in this area based on our modeling work. The only condition that you'll see in a subsequent slide is that in the development agreement, I don't know why I keep wanting to say preliminary something or other, but within the development agreement, we'll be including a requirement that they can't put sod down for all of these new homes, essentially in July next summer when we might have drier conditions unless the DNR permit approval has been granted. Stormwater management, this one is subject to Carver County WMO rules, and this development team is very familiar with those rules, and I think you already have your permit from them based on the plans that are in before the city.
So looking at the preliminary plat requirements that were approved back in May by the City Council, they are meeting most of the requirements. They do have a few items left still, including a traffic impact analysis per staff's review comments back in April. They have submitted it as of last Friday, so I wasn't able to update the case in time. Staff has not been able to review that thoroughly yet, but we do have one in hand. Also, the signage specifications that I mentioned earlier, as well as additional documentation to our city attorney for reviews such as title work and maintenance agreements, and then the well, which Kara just gave an update on. So looking at our preliminary plat conditions, typically we see those conditions met prior to a final plat approval. So we will need a determination from the City Council this evening if approving a final plat is appropriate given the items mentioned in the last slide and that I touched on briefly here as well. So a public hearing was held by the Planning Commission at their regular meeting last week. They did not have any public comments submitted. They discussed the water capacity issue that we discussed with well number 6, as well as the need for a traffic impact analysis, which also looked at a quiet crossing for County Road 11. The Planning Commission did end up recommending approval with a 5-0 vote. And then here are the staff proposed conditions for approval if the City Council decides a final plat approval is good for this evening. And I will just note a change to number 2, as Kara mentioned, not for the construction of subdivision improvements, but that well must be completed and permitted prior to installation of sod for the development. And with that, I have 4 motions for you this evening and some sample motions for you on the screen. I will just note that number 3 absolutely should be to table the summary publication if the City Council approves the ordinance, because we need a 4/5 vote for that, and we do not have 4 council members this evening. So for that, staff can stand for any questions, and the applicant is in the audience this evening.
Thank you. Council, I'd like to open the floor for discussion.
Yeah, I just had some questions. So I'm seeing that in the deviations on for this planned unit development, there's a slope reduction in the berming.
Yes, there is a reduction proposed, and I don't know if the applicant would like to speak on that a little bit more. I will just note that it's fairly similar to what you will see along County Road 11 existing today with those unmaintained slopes.
Correct, Councilmember. My name is Matt Pavick. I'm one of the developers on the site. The reason we did a 2-to-1 slope, we wanted it to be unmaintained and we wanted to achieve the highest height we could get. So, but doing a 2-to-1 allowed us to get the highest, tallest berm.
Yeah, and I think that was the direction, is by reducing the slope, we essentially are pushing a higher berm.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. And then maybe you want to stay, because I think that we had some thoughts at a preliminary plat about the nature of this unique development. It does serve a need. I think we've addressed that. But there were several concerns about the nature of shrinking the road size down, and as a result, it doesn't conform with our city standards, so that there would be the private road agreement aspect of this project. I believe that one of the things that we talked about was the need to get into the development agreement like almost a sinking fund to address the future reconstruction of those roads that have an analytical rigor to it, and then have an appropriate amount set aside. And I think we wanted that development agreement to be locking in, so to speak, that should a future owner of this want to seek to have the city take those roads over, that there would be an adequacy determination by city staff, and then an expectation of forfeiture of that sinking fund, so to speak, so that the city is not in a position of owning roads at residents' request that now have to reach into either residents through a special assessment or have the city share in those costs. So I don't know where we've gotten with that, but I think that that's still something that's important for us to ensure, especially given the number of units in here and just the overall size of this road in terms of length and square footage.
Councilmember, yes. Just an important detail on that topic is that all of these units will be owned by a single entity. So it's a rental project that'll be owned and controlled and financed and maintained by a single operator. And Ian Peterson is here with that group that could discuss those funding mechanisms for how they budget for maintenance of the roadways and the yards and the driveways and everything on the project. So he could give you those details. It's different than, I think maybe when we were having those conversations, we were thinking more of an HOA type of a situation where you would want to have some kind of a backstop so individual residences weren't having issues. So here, I think it's a different philosophy behind that, but we're certainly agreeable to that concept to make sure that isn't an issue in the future. So
okay, great.
We're happy to work with staff on that. But I can let Ian talk a little bit about
great,
the
thank you.
Yes, good evening. Ian Peterson with Integrate Properties. I believe when we were here for preliminary plat, I shared with you that we have numerous communities just like this where there are private roads, private drives, actually just going through the buyout right now for snow removal for this upcoming year as it relates to that. As it relates to the maintenance of the private streets, typically when we do this and these concerns come up, within the development agreement itself, there's a portion in there that we do a 5-year maintenance plan and submit that to the city as it relates to the streets, the conditions, chip sealing, crack sealing, whatever we're going to call it, that we need to do, and then that needs to be done within the next construction season. But typically that's on a 5-year plan, so we get done with the project. 5 years later, we submit that to the city and then address any concerns they may need to have done at that time. And in terms of reserves, we reserve for pretty much everything, for roofs, for siding, long-term window replacement, front doors, patios, concrete. And on this one, we roll in the private streets, concrete, curb and gutter repair, X%, so, over 7 years, 10 years. So that all gets rolled into the average rents per se.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Councilmember Gunderson.
Couple of things. I'm not super enthused about 95% impervious. Is there any way that number can change? And I'll give you my thinking in this particular setting is that 95% means more bituminous, more cement, more asphalt, whatever it is, which with no tree canopy is going to create a very hot environment in the summer, which means heating costs are going through the roof, energy usage is through the roof, things like that. So if there's any way you guys can get it down under 90, that would be really beneficial. I think not only to the people that are going to live there, but also to the community as a whole. And then my second comment is how future ready are these units going to be? Meaning for alternate sources of energy, solar, charging stations for electric vehicles, things that aren't the now, but in 5 years, 6 years are going to be more prevalent than they are now. So not having them, I think, is going to put these residents maybe at a disadvantage, not being able to have those types of things.
Yes, council member. I'll take the first question. I'll have Ian address the second. The 95% number is kind of it's an indicator of just the platted townhome lot itself, which is a super compressed lot line, and it's not reflective of the project as a whole. So our overall impervious on the whole project, I don't remember the number, but it's close to, I think, 60% or something like that. So it's because of the nature of townhome lots and the way that they're platted, that number is really high just because you pretty much plat the boundary of the house. Yep. So that's the reasoning for that. And we do have, we feel the importance of that open space, and we do provide for that well beyond the required minimum. So.
I understand the larger area of the project, but in this area, is it gonna do you see other developments like this? Are they warmer than without a tree canopy than maybe a larger area? Energy consumption in the summer, very hot, right?
Correct, and we do have a lot of trees proposed on the project. It takes a few years for them to grow up, and provide that shade. You're right. So this is part of the kind of the nature of the development, but generally speaking, the design behind this development was to create as much open space as we could and hit those densities. Okay. So we think that we've done that as much as we can. So, but I'll let Ian answer the question about that foresight into the other technologies.
Thanks.
Yeah, great question, council member. Wish I could see further into the future in terms of technology needs that we need. I will share all the homes are pre-wired for electric car chargers. Okay. We don't put the charger in because if you're going to drive a Tesla, and council member over here is going to drive a Rivian, and somebody else is going to drive, Cybertruck, I guess that's Tesla, but you want your own charger. Yeah. So that's, we pre-wire. There are tech tubes that during construction go up to the attic, so it's all ready for solar capability. Every home is energy rated and energy tested, blower door test, as well as various insulation inspections and other things as it goes along the way. Roof placement is part of that equation in terms of so many square feet of roof in this territory facing south, southeast, southwest. And then, all of the homes are smart rent homes. And so you can control basically everything in your home off your phone. So you can control your thermostat, your lights, there's leak sensors in there, your front door, Ring doorbell, your garage door, basically everything in your home you can control from your phone. So if you have any other great ideas for further technology, let me know and we'll try to incorporate them. But that's a huge benefit and something that we try to stay ahead of. I'm heading to Park City in October to meet with some folks, talk about the next stages of smart home technology and what that means.
Good.
So,
Thanks.
Excellent, thank you.
Acting Mayor?
Yep.
Just a question. I heard developer reps indicate that in response to a question about the private drives, that the intention to have the whole development commonly owned into the future goes to that issue, addresses that issue to some extent. I just wonder, I don't know if it's for staff or for developer folks, but sort of how, to the extent that would be an obligation, are we intending that that would be a development agreement requirement, or how would that be secured? How would that obligation be reflected in something that's meaningful?
yeah, I can share examples of what we've done in the past. Typically, it's addressed in the development agreement through Exhibit H or something like that. The obligations as it relates to private roads, maintenance report back to the city, ongoing maintenance of all of those items. In the past, we've also put in the development agreements, because we don't create an HOA at this point, that if for some reason in the future these were going to be sold as for sale homes, that we would need to come before the city council with those HOA documents clearly outlining, show the financials and how, you know, the clubhouse is going to be supported and all those items. So I can definitely share examples. You may have some of your own, but of ones that we've done in the past.
Yeah, Acting Mayor and Council, I just would, for the benefit of staff, I mean, staff in this city takes the first cut at development agreements, so maybe we can have you share some examples, because it sounds like that should be in the development agreement, which is fine by me, but I think it's got to be somewhere if that's part of addressing the potential for the roads to be something that the city's asked to take over at some prospective future date. We want to address that, so very good.
Right, and thank you, Attorney Lewis. I think we are driving at is not necessarily having the agreements, you know, to talk about the 5-year plan and the monitoring it, and you know, ensuring that these things are cared for. Those are noble pursuits, and they should be. But I think the crux of where I'm going is that we have seen where private roads have been asked for to be turned over to city property, and residents have had to forego their reserves held for those improvements as a consideration for the city to take ownership of that outlot. So I think our development agreements should be specific to a case like that occurring, that the owners would, in similar fashion, be obligated to turn over those reserves for those items that is wished for the city to assume ownership and maintenance. So, and we'll talk about some of the other things that we're concerned with when we start to consider the motions, but that would be something that didn't appear to be on our list of punch list items, and I know that we did talk about that during preliminary plat.
Any other comments for discussion, Councilmember Jefferson? On that note, there are 4 motions to consider. So for tonight, and Mr. McCann, can you help us out with those?
Yes, absolutely. So I have the 4 motions on the screen for you. Each motion has the option to adopt, table, or deny. As I mentioned at the end of my presentation, number 3, though, should be to table the approving summary publication, because we do not have the 4 votes required.
Acting Mayor, are you ready to entertain motion?
Yes, Council, can I get a motion?
Sure. On number 1, I'd like to motion to table the resolution approving the final plat for Victoria South. Staff in their presentation seems to have provided a pretty fair number of items that remain to be resolved. They don't appear that they've had enough time for consideration of certain items. I think that tabling is an appropriate method to address this particular part of the what's before us tonight.
Can I get a second?
Just for clarification, are we tabling everything and having it come back? Or are you adopting the summary resolution? We would come back and vote on that? But we would approve everything else?
Well, for clarity, Councilmember Gunderson, I feel that with what staff has presented, items 1, 2, and 3, I'd make a motion on each of those to table those. Certainly table 3 is clearly we need a 4/5 attendance by council. So we statutorily can't do anything other than deny it or to table it. So that's, if we want to consider those 3, or we can consider all 4. I mean, I think that tabling motion number 1, tabling motion number 2 before us, tabling motion number 3, obviously for the reasons I just mentioned. And then on motion number 4, I think we can approve that so that they can start grading while we're in the midst of construction season.
Okay, I'm just concerned. I don't want to make, I mean, it seems it's a final plat and most things seem to be ready to go. If all we have to do is vote on the summary publication at the next meeting, then let's do that. But I think everything else sounded like it was is handled or will be handled through the development process.
Ms. Hardy?
Thank you, Acting Mayor, members of the council. I just want to note that if you choose to adopt, one thing that staff would do is we would not sign the DA, and we would not file that preliminary sign the milers or record that final plat until all of the conditions have been met. So I just want to make sure that you're aware that if you choose to do that, there are still some risk control measures in place that staff would be monitoring and making sure that there's follow through on that. I think from a staff perspective, we don't have any heartburn on tabling that. We would suggest that if you table it to a date certain. We would recommend September 23rd for that. And as Councilmember Ivansky noted, the grading agreement in our ordinance, we do give some flexibility to allow grading with a permit anytime between preliminary and final plat. So no heartburn on that from a staff perspective for approving that here this evening. Not sure if that helps, but I just wanted to provide some additional information.
Then move to table items 1 through 3 until 9/23. Can we do that? Just move to table items 1 through 3.
I think that, I'll amend my motion on number 1 to table date certain the resolution approving final plat for Victoria South, September 23rd, was it, Madam City Manager?
Yes.
So if we want to consider all 3 motions, then I'll...
Yeah, we're table them all.
Well, then I'll make a motion to table the date certain, September 23rd, the ordinance approving rezoning from agricultural to planned unit development for the Victoria South residential development. And then I'll make a motion to table the date certain, the resolution approving summary publication of the ordinance where we had the opportunity to have a 4/5 majority to September 23rd.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then a motion to approve grading agreement for Victoria South.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next on the agenda is item 6.6, which is to consider the adoption of a resolution calling for a final assessment hearing for the Steger Lake Lane Phase 1 improvements. Presenting this evening is Cara Guerin. Ms. Guerin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Acting Mayor and members of the City Council. So you have 2 agenda items tonight, both related to the same action essentially, but for 2 different projects. So essentially, we've reached the point of construction for these projects that we're ready to call for the assessment hearing. So the first item on your agenda for 6.6 would be to approve a resolution calling for the final assessment hearing for the Steiger Lake Lane Phase 1 improvements. As a reminder, because this started quite a while ago, the Steiger Lake Lane Phase 1 improvements include the reconstruction of Steiger Lake Lane from the bridge here on the west side of downtown out to Highway 5. As the council is aware, this project has been a journey. It has taken significantly longer to get across the finish line with challenges we had with private utilities located in the corridor. A big element of this project was burying overhead power lines for Xcel Energy, and it caused quite a few delays. So that's why it is finally in front of you tonight. The final assessment roll here is shown on your screen. The proposed assessments remain unchanged from what the council reviewed and approved as part of the feasibility study completed quite some time ago. As a reminder, at that time, we had identified the potential to assess 2 parcels that are owned by Three Rivers Park District, and at the time, the Park District flagged raised some concerns with our ability to actually assess those properties. So I'm noting with a strike through here that it is unlikely that we will proceed with actually assessing those 2 properties, but we would still give them notice of the final assessment hearing. So the action tonight is to adopt a resolution declaring the cost to be assessed and calling for a hearing on the proposed assessments. So the council isn't taking any actual action on the assessments. What you're doing tonight is calling for a public hearing. That hearing would be held on October 14th. Mailed notice would be provided to the property owners and published in the paper as required. One element for the council specifically to the Steiger Lake Lane resolution is one of the elements of the resolution is to note what the interest rate will be on the proposed assessments. On other projects and the way the city's assessment policy is written, you set the interest rate at 2% over what the city issues debt for on the project. For the Steiger Lake Lane project, you did not issue bonds for the street and storm sewer improvements. You paid cash. So I reviewed with the finance director today what she would recommend for an interest rate for these assessments, and her recommendation would be an interest rate of 5.7%. That's the same interest rate that you're going to see in the next agenda item that we're discussing. So the interest rate for the 2023 street improvement project, so that's 2% over what the city issued debt for. In addition, she said that this interest rate is consistent with what the city is making as interest on your money market accounts currently. So, if you had the cash, that would be the type of interest rate you'd be seeing on it. And so with that, I would answer any questions, otherwise would be looking for action on this resolution.
Council, any discussion?
Bob, did we ever get a legal opinion on being able to charge essentially Three Rivers Park District or assess them for the land? Was there ever I remember the conversation, and it was more of a grayish area. Are we still in that grayish, probably not going to be able to, but
Yeah, Acting Mayor Council and Kara will remind me of what our exchange about the legalities of that were. But yeah, essentially what you said is right. I mean, as a legal matter, we could assess, but there's a question about whether there's benefit. You'll recall, generally speaking, that we can only assess up to the amount of property value increase that we provide to a property, and there's a question about the extent to which that particular property and that particular use gains much benefit from the city's project. So I think that's where we ended up focusing our attention, and I think I agree with your city engineer's analysis that it's sort of, we're starting to balance angels on the head of a pin when we start to figure out exactly what benefit a publicly owned public property gets from a new road adjoining it.
The only thing I would add to that is the area of Park District property that's adjacent to this improvement is steep slope. It's not usable, accessible to the public parkland, like say if we were up by the Lowry Nature Center as an example. So, the type of land in this area is notably different than, if you had usable parkland.
I'm just getting at that I don't want there to be a negative impact to residents that are paying that their assessed amount. And if we didn't ask or didn't attempt to collect the assessment, that we would be putting them at a disadvantage and other residents at a disadvantage over the cost of the project. So I just want to make sure we're covering all our bases, that we made an attempt to get all the information about collecting from Three Rivers to the benefit of the project and everyone else who has to pay for it.
So this assessment roll that we're seeing in front of us that you've struck out, this is substantially similar to what the assessment in rough form was computed to be back when we had council approve the project?
That is correct. So we are not proposing to increase or decrease the proposed assessments. Essentially, the project cost did come in higher than what was represented at the feasibility study, but staff isn't recommending that the council consider increases to those assessment amounts at this time.
Councilmember Gunderson's point that there's $42,000 that was in the projected assessment roll. What we are not seeing is 21,000 of that being reallocated to the other residents impacted by it. We are essentially, in other words, the city of Victoria is absorbing what would have been an assessment against the Three Rivers Park District. And with the question that if we prevail, then the city of Victoria would be reimbursed solely and exclusively. But aside from being able to prevail, we reach into the city's pockets to solve the problem.
That is correct. It just moves over to the city's bucket of funding responsibility.
And just making sure we're all comfortable with not continuing to go down the path of collecting that $42,000 and let it be absorbed into but just cover us. We've had the conversation. We've done our due diligence. Right. We're accepting a $42,000 absorption.
No, I mean, I think we have to sort of review the concept of, do we want to pay Kennedy and Graven $42,000 to get a legal opinion that we ultimately would not prevail anyways, and maybe discretion is a better part of valor in this, that we move forward and close these projects and go on. The only other comment I'd like to put before the council tonight and the public, that because we paid for cash, the 2% over the prevailing bond rate would be normally the calculation. I'll add that the United States government at the close of business today would borrow for 10 years with full faith and credit of the U.S. government, no spread on that, at 371. So the rate that's being proposed is essentially giving our residents on this government funding for risks that are not government risks. So we're being quite fair with where the city has decided to set that.
Okay.
One other number that I just want to note for the record is that, with this project, the total cost of the improvements is $2.5 million. So the portion of the project that we're proposing to collect in assessments from these residential properties is $60,000. So compared to the overall project cost, it is a very small amount of the project. The city's assessment policy actually calls for up to 100% of the street and storm sewer costs to be assessed to the adjacent property owners. At the time of the feasibility study, the council concluded that we couldn't demonstrate that there was $2 million or $1 million in benefit to the adjacent property owners. So the city council capped the assessments. The $12,000 per unit was based on what the city had assessed for the 78th and Cochia project a number of years ago. So the city directed us to, the council, concluded to cap it accordingly.
Is this cap, are they getting the value at this cap? Is it fair value that what they're getting with the assessment?
That is the council's decision.
Again, as Ms. Guerin noted, we are not holding the public hearing, rather informing the public that we are calling for the final assessment hearing and declaring the final assessment costs. So,
A motion to adopt a resolution declaring the cost to be assessed and calling for a hearing on the proposed assessment for Steiger Lake Lane West Phase 1 improvements with an interest rate of 5.7%, and the hearing to be held on October 14th, 2024.
can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next on the list tonight is item 6.7, which is also to consider adoption of a resolution calling for the final assessment hearing for the 2023 street and drainage improvement, presenting once again our city engineer, Kara Guerin.
Great, thank you. Acting Mayor, members of the City Council, I am sorry this graphic is so terrible. I don't know how you're supposed to know what you're looking at there, but the streets included in the 2023 street project were 80th Street, which is in front of Victoria Auto Repair, and then Rose Street heading south to 81st Street, Sunflower heading south to 81st Street, and then Trillium Trail, which is actually an alley that has homes fronted on it, were also included in the improvements. So that project is approaching final completion. We're just making sure the grass has grown and addressing some finer punch list items. But similar to the last item, essentially you are taking the same action. Same situation as the last project. We are not proposing any changes to what was presented in the feasibility study. I do want to note that there is two different types of properties on this project. So there are specifically commercial properties that abut 80th Street, which is a wider road, has slightly different conditions associated with it. So the proposed assessment for the commercial properties along 80th Street are a little bit higher than the residential properties on the other streets. So that's why you're seeing the difference in numbers. And then you also will see that there are two parcels that are struck through on this graphic, and that is because they're properties who have driveways from 81st Street. So under the city's policy, we assess, and what our practice has been for a corner lot, we assess them for the improvements on the street that their driveway is accessed from, so that they aren't paying double what other residents are paying. And with that, the interest rate for this one isn't in question because the city's adopted policy calls for it to be 2% over the bond rate. That's where the 5.7% came from on this one. And so with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Guerin. Council.
The two properties that got struck through, were they recently assessed on their street where they exit onto recently? I thought we talked about what they had been assessed for repairs, and I don't remember.
They actually haven't, to my knowledge, been recently assessed, but their street was improved over 20 years ago, so we did not try to go back into the records. The county had actually done improvements to 81st Street as part of the County Road 11 project, but when that road comes back around, we're doing a mill and overlay for it now, but at some point it will need to be rebuilt.
Okay, and so at that time, likely they'd be assessed for whatever.
Under the current policy.
And then we would not assess these properties, correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Any other discussion?
No, none for me. I think that staff has clearly laid out what has happened with the street, the drainage and street improvements for that area. Thank you.
Okay. Again, on this item, council, we're not holding a public hearing this evening. The action is to consider this, to inform the public about the final assessment hearing and declaring the costs to be assessed. Seeing no further discussion, I'll look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution declaring the cost to be assessed and calling for a hearing on the proposed assessments for 2023 street and drainage improvements. Hearing to be held on October 14th, 2024.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Council, there are no more items on our regular agenda. With that, we will move on to reports and emerging issues. Attorney Vos, any?
No, Acting Mayor, I don't have anything, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hardy, any reports from staff?
None from staff, Acting Mayor.
Okay. Councilmember Gunderson. Councilmember Ransky?
None for me, Acting Mayor.
Okay, if there are no more items to come before the body this evening, may I ask for a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We will stand adjourned.